it. And there was this great image that I saw the other day by this illustrator named Liz Fosslien. And the image is of a gas tank. And I don't know if you can see it, but the gas tank here is in the yellow zone. And the caption above says when we should take a break. And then the next image is the dial is in the red zone as in empty. And it says, the caption says when we actually take a break. Since you're listening to this podcast, I'm guessing you can relate to that image. Well, on today's Harness the Power of Planning podcast, we talk about self-care as healthcare on this part 1 of episode 89, starting now. Good morning. It is Thursday, and I am Alegre of Beyond Your Wildest Dreams, and I am on a mission to help you prioritize yourself and your goals by harnessing the power of planning, which is why when I put this live video cast up as a podcast, it is called the Harness the Power of Planning podcast. And you can find that wherever you listen to your podcast. And this will actually be episode 89. I can't believe how close I am to 100. It has been years in the making. It is definitely a marathon, not a sprint. And I'm often accompanied by my good friend Natasha, who I co-wrote 4 workbooks with. These are our, as we call them, bouquet of books. And these books are all designed to help you prioritize yourself and your goals because you are important. And this was something that took me a long time to learn. And I will get into it when I get into our topics today. But first, as I've mentioned, I've been doing the last month or so, I'm going to pull a little quote from this box of quotes that sits on my desk that I absolutely love because it always seems like I get just the right quote when I need it. So let's see what today's quote is. I don't look at these in advance, by the way. Okay. Anything, everywhere, little or big, becomes an adventure when the right person shares it. Kathleen Norris. Anything, everywhere, little or big, becomes an adventure when the right person shares it. I have to say, I feel like this is the first quote that I want to amend a little bit. Usually I just take the quote and I run with it. But this quote, I feel like I want to change it to say, anything, everything, little or big, becomes an adventure when you have the right mindset. Because that is what I have found, is that anything can be an adventure. Going to the DMV can be an adventure if you have the right mindset. If you're open, I have met I've had some really interesting conversations when I've been forced to go to the DMV unplanned. I live in California. I don't know where you live, and you can actually make appointments here at our DMV. And when you make an appointment, you're kind of like in and out. It's awesome. But one time my license was stolen, and so I had to go unexpectedly, and I had the most interesting conversation with a person who I actually ended up grabbing a meal with after that. So I believe that everything can be an adventure if you have the right attitude. I was once on a girls' trip, which is coming up again soon. I have these 4 girlfriends that one of whom I've known since I was 12. I have to actually do the math every time I think about it. Whatever 8th grade is. One of whom I've been friends with since 8th grade. The other 3 I've been friends with since 1998, so 27 years. And we get together once a year because it's so important to us. And one time we got together someplace where I had to actually do some logistical stuff. I had to actually get a car registered. And it was actually quite a lot of work, but I refused to leave the mindset of being on vacation. And so fortunately, I was somewhere really pretty and I was just admiring all of the plants and the trickling waterfalls and that sort of thing. So I just want to amend this quote that I pulled today and change it to anything, everything, little or big, becomes an adventure when you have the right mindset. Because I don't think you need people to share in the joy for it to be an adventure. Yes, that's wonderful, but it can be an adventure just you with the right mindset. And I often find that there's a little sentence that I say to myself that helps me shift something from being challenging to being interesting. And so instead of complaining about whatever it is that has happened to me, I will say something like, "Hmm, isn't that funny?" Because you know what? People and situations are funny. And look, it doesn't always work. Let me tell you. I know some of us are having some big feelings. I know I've been having some big feelings for the last couple of months. And I've always believed that how you show up when you're facing a challenge is who you really are. Because it's easy to be positive and optimistic and friendly when everything's going your way. But when things are a little bit challenging, that's when your true, "What are you made of?" comes out. So, mindset and reframing are really, really powerful tools, brain science backed tools. Feel free to do some research on those because I have found them to be really helpful. And if you are actually looking for maybe a book recommendation, I love Stoic philosophy. And while this book is not billed as a Stoic book, I've been listening to it recently and I'm really enjoying it. And it's called 101 Essays That Will Change the Way You Think by Brianna Wiest. And I highly recommend that book. It's been fantastic having it in my ear. My husband's been listening to it as well, and he loves it as well. So it's a good book. So today's topics are self-care is healthcare and taking advantage of the fresh start effect. So I'm going to talk about self-care as healthcare first, and then the fresh start effect second. I actually will be doing a presentation for a women's organization called Ladies Who Lead up in Northern California in a couple months. And I'm doing the presentation on self-care because I know that as I have gotten older and taken on more responsibilities, self-care is one of the hardest things to hold on to. And I don't know what season of life you are in. I am raising a teenage daughter, and I'm also part of the sandwich generation, which means I am helping to support people older than me, meaning my mom, my mother-in-law. So my mom is in her late 70s, my mother-in-law is in her mid 80s, and then my 100-year-old bedridden grandmother, bless her heart. Oh, it's a lot. It's been a lot. If you've listened to the last couple of podcasts, you know how challenging it can be to deal with an emergency situation like the LA wildfires that have been going on for, oh my goodness, 2.5 weeks now. It was really challenging being in a situation where we were going to have to evacuate my 100-year-old bedridden grandmother. Yes. Anyway, go back and listen to those episodes. But the more responsibility that you take on, at least in my experience, I have found that it gets harder and harder to prioritize yourself, which is really where Beyond Your Wildest Dreams was born out of. Beyond Your Wildest Dreams was born out of a time in my life when my child was right around 5 years old. And I felt like I did not know who I was anymore. And I was an older mother. Maybe you don't have this situation, but I just felt like I was 36 when I had my child. And so I had a really strong identity by that point. And I love being a mom, but I wasn't sure if I was going to be a mom because it wasn't one of those things where I was like, absolutely, no matter what, I'm definitely becoming a mom. For me, it was, I had to find the right partner. I had to be in the right mindset. That was my path to becoming a mom. And so when my child was about 5 years old, I started to feel like I just had a little more mental bandwidth to think about myself again, because those first 5 years, man, they are rough. If you feel like If you feel like you just don't know which way is up and you don't know I literally remember one day I was holding my child while I was standing up, and I was so exhausted because she hadn't slept through the night, and I remember standing there holding her to my chest and thinking to myself, am I awake? Is this a dream?" I was so tired, I literally did not know if I was awake or asleep. That is how exhausting it can be taking care of a child, and kudos to you. It's a challenging season of life. Hopefully, you have the help of friends and family. I had some help, but not a lot with friends and family, and I was really the main caregiver for my child, and I loved it, but it was definitely exhausting. But then around 5, my child became a lot more independent. And feel free to chat or comment in the chat page. I see it. I will also see it if you listen to the recorded version. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them. I'm happy to answer them. And so when my kiddo hit about 5, I just noticed that I felt like I had more brain space. I was sleeping more, all of the things, and I could finally take a look at my life. And I felt like I was doing all of the things, but none of them well. And I also felt like I was not taking care of myself. I just was exhausted, physically, emotionally exhausted. And I've actually burnt out physically, emotionally 2.5 times in my life. This was the half point. This was the point where I wasn't in full burnout mode where I was physically incapacitated, but I could feel myself creeping up to the ledge. The other 2 times I was burnt out, I was physically incapacitated, literally bedridden. And fortunately, I learned from those experiences, and I've talked about those before. If you wanna look at an earlier podcast episode, the one about it's called My Burnout Story. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can listen to that one if you wanna hear it. But I was recognizing the signs of burnout, and I was able to backpedal. And I that's when I came upon the idea of really taking control of my morning. And this is what our book, Rock Your Morning, is born out of. And by the way, all of our books are workbooks. They're designed to be done in 45 minutes. And they're also designed to actually have you implement what you learn because I know from my decades of training and coaching and teaching that people learn best when they do. It's one thing to hear something and learn something, it's a total another thing to do it. And so I just remember feeling around this time when my kiddo was 5 years old that I would wake up in the morning and immediately feel stressed, immediately feel anxious, and think to myself, "I don't know what to do today." Because before my kiddo, I had my schedule, and then my child's first 5 years, she was kind of it was her body clock that was kind of running the schedule. But now that my time was my own, I kind of had to relearn what I wanted my morning to be, and I decided to be very purposeful about it because of the fact that I could feel burnout coming on. So, I just thought to myself, "You know what? I just really, really wanna do things that help me take care of myself right now, and I wanna do them first. First things first." Maybe you've heard this phrase, "eat the frog." It's a business phrase, which is do the hardest thing you have to do first thing in the morning, because then it's just not hanging over you all day. And so I decided to quote unquote "eat the frog" and just really focus my morning on myself. And did that require me to get up a little bit earlier? Yes, it did. But it's been totally worth it. And there was this great image that I saw the other day by this illustrator named Liz Fosslien. And the image is of a gas tank, and I don't know if you can see it, but the gas tank here is in the yellow zone, and the caption above says when we should take a break. And then the next image is the dial is in the red zone as in empty, and it says the caption says, "When we actually take a break." And maybe you felt that. Let me know if you felt that. If you feel like the only times you take a break is when you are burnt out and running on empty. I hear you. I have been there. I have felt that. And I would say that nowadays, I feel like I am taking care of myself every day. I am basically feeling like I'm always in the green zone, which is a wonderful place to come from every single day because it means that when I am showing up as a friend, a wife, a daughter, a mom, a trainer, a coach, it means that I am coming from a place of being full up. I am giving from my overflow. I'm not giving from a half empty or empty cup. I'm giving because I have energy to give. You can't you can't do what I do. I don't think you can do what I do from a place of being empty because you just won't show up as an entrepreneur. If you are on empty, you're just in bed because there's probably no one forcing you to get up. So as an entrepreneur, you have to take care of yourself because it's the only way that you have the mental bandwidth to go out and create and seek out opportunities. You don't I couldn't write 4 books from a place of being empty. And especially at my age, if you've listened to me before, you know that I turned 50 and I'm gonna be 51 actually this year. I turned 50 last year, and it's even more important to take care of myself because you have to drink more water now. You have to get more movement in. I actually heard a guy the other day say something that I thought was pretty hilarious, which is, "Yeah, you have to retire at 65 because at 65, your body is your job." And at 50, I can tell you, I'm starting to feel that where it's just like everything I do, I have timers to get up from sitting so that I can get in squats. That's another form of self-care because I feel like my body needs constant attention nowadays. So I thought that was a really hilarious comment. So self-care can be whatever you want it to be. The definition of self-care is what you need. And this is, I think I have a actual article up here. Let me see if I have the code for it. There was an article that was written by a medical journal about self-care, and they had a great definition of self-care that I just wanna share with you. And it was basically that self-care is everything that you need in order to feel emotionally, physically satisfied. And it is, and there's so many self-care, 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 self-care. Okay, I'm gonna have to find it and put it into the comments, the show notes for the podcast and everything because I have so many. Oh, here we go. Here we go. In Prevention Magazine, self-care, and I'm just gonna put up the URL for it. It's tinyurl.com/prevention SC, and I'll put up the link right here. And you can read it because maybe you need some convincing. I get it. Self-care can feel like just another thing that you're adding to your life. Here's the QR code. If you want to click on that, it will take you straight to that article. But I think what this article makes really clear is that self-care is healthcare. The title of the article is "What is Self-Care? Doctors explain why it's important for your long-term health, plus how to practice your own self-care if you're a beginner." So this is a great intro article. And I think the challenge when you start taking on I think the challenge is our culture doesn't teach us how important it is to take care of your emotional and physical needs, how essential it is. And Maybe that's because we don't really need to be taught it. We seek it out for ourselves when we have the time. The challenge becomes when you have less time for yourself, that it can be easy to put self-care further and further down the list to the point where you're not doing it at all. So, read this article about self-care. It's fantastic. If you wanna check out my book, Rock Your Morning, it will walk you through exactly how to come up with a morning ritual for yourself. And here's the one thing I just wanna add about having a morning ritual. When I didn't have a morning ritual, I felt like I had all of these reminders going off in my head all the time. Did you drink enough water? Did you take your supplements? Have you done your exercise? Have you thought about your gratitude? Whatever it was that I had said to myself that I wanted to be doing that day. Those were basically like open windows in my head, the way with your computer when you have tons of open windows. And it actually takes up energy having those open windows because you're just constantly reminding yourself. And every reminder is a little bit exhausting and also a little bit, it's a little bit emotionally a withdrawal. It's a little bit depressing to be like, God, I still haven't done that thing. Oh, I still haven't done that thing. However, what I have found is that by having a morning ritual and really adhering to it and practicing it every day, my brain is so much quieter and I am so much happier because I don't have those little nudges pointing out to me, one, that they haven't been done, and two, that clearly I don't care about myself enough to do these things. No, they are closed, they are done, and I am happy because I know that I am being taken care of. So that is Self-Care is Healthcare, part 1 of today's episode. So let's get into part 2. Part 2 is I want to talk a little bit about the fresh start effect. And this would usually have been a topic that I would have covered earlier in the year. However, these little things called the LA wildfires kind of hijacked the podcast the last few weeks. And unfortunately, they're still going on now. I don't know if you're in the Los Angeles, California area. Unfortunately, 2 new fires broke out yesterday. One of them was small and contained really quickly. The other one was a lot bigger. And oh, wonderful. I'm so glad to hear it, Christopher. This is a comment that someone's family is being taken care of. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was my pleasure to speak with you about self-care is healthcare and ways to maximize the fresh start effect. And I hope that you and your family are safe and healthy and that you are taking care of yourself because no one else can do it for you. And you deserve to be taken care of. If you want to take your planning skills to the next level, consider taking the Harness the Power of Planning workshop. It's available on demand at tinyurl.com/HPOP on demand, all one word. That's tinyurl.com/HPOP on demand. We'll show you how to plan your day, your week, your month, your year, your life, and help you to start prioritizing yourself and your goals right now. Dream wild, wild dreamers. Thanks for joining us for the Harness the Power of Planning podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you listen.